Yeah, of course.
I let Patty not be here and I let Dane not be here, is that all right?
All right. Call to order. Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Well, this is the last session for the year, and we're going to try to make this an efficient one, since the schedule versus what we're faced in January and February is going to be relatively light. So maybe with that, we can get started with the minutes. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve the executive session and regular session minutes from November 18th, 2019.
Second. Any discussion, amendments, comments on the minutes? All in favor? All opposed? Okay. Motion passed. I guess there's no public to comment this evening. Is there? All right, we'll move past public comment, and let's hear from our student representatives this evening.
Hello. So we wanted to start off by talking about the 26 Days of Kindness and just kind of recapping that. So we had our assembly recently, and it was really, really nice. It was very uplifting and paid nice homage to the event, but also was very centralized around the theme of kindness. Mark Barden and his daughter Natalie came, and they had a really wonderful speech about the different things that you could do in your community, in your school community, in your town community, even within just your close immediate friends and family, to spread this idea of kindness, which was really, really wonderful. We also had a musical performance by our teachers. There were a few mishaps with the mics, but at the end it worked out great, and everyone loved it. Everyone loved it. Everyone had their little phone flashlights up and were singing along, which was really sweet. And then Mr. Durand, who's an English teacher at the high school, had a mindfulness activity, which got everyone out of their seats and onto the gym floor, which was really cool. And then on Friday, which was the last day of our school's participation in 26 Days of Kindness, we had a phone-free day, which was kind of cool because if you decided to put your phone away for the day, you'd get a little sticker that had a X through the phone, and that was really awesome to see how many people actually did participate in that. And then we also had a food drive that lasted the entirety of the 26 Days of Kindness, and we got a lot of different items. It wasn't just food drive for food. It was also different holiday items, toiletries, things like that, and it was overall really successful.
Oops. All right. So the next thing that we have to talk about was the football game on Saturday morning, and I'm sure you have all heard, but we won the Class M state championship, and that was very fun to see. And as student government representatives, I think we have a lot of thanks to say for the football team, because they definitely played a huge part in making us or enabling us to generate such an environment of heavy school spirit where everyone's involved and having fun with that. And I mean, now we have an assembly that is planned for Wednesday morning where we're going to honor all the state championship winning teams, which is football and girls swim and dive, and should be fun, and we plan to make it a tradition. So every year we have teams that win state championships. They will be recognized. What else do I have for that? It was the first time ever that the football team became state champions.
So in addition to football winning, our mock trial teams, 2 out of 3 of them advanced on Friday of last week. We had a competition. I went with one of the teams and we competed at Stanford Superior Court, which was really awesome. It was a beautiful courthouse. So that was really fun. And then in addition, we had all the senior classes had different meetings with Miss Randy Green and different counselors, guidance counselors from the school to meet about college decisions, because we've all pretty much applied at this point. It's just a matter of getting decisions back, which can be very nerve-wracking. So they talked to us in small groups about how to approach getting these different decisions, acceptances, denials, deferrals, etc., and what to do when you're faced with these decisions along the lines of financial aid or different scholarships, all things that could kind of prepare for different stressors that come with the decisions of college, which was really nice and kind of made a lot of us relax a little bit.
The next thing that we had in the past week was the Chinese delegates came, and these were not the students that we had previously had, but this was rather a board of administrators from all over China or near our sister schools, I believe. But they came, they toured the high school. I spoke to them for a bit in Chinese. That was kind of fun, and we showed them individual classes, had them sit down in like government, science classes, Mandarin, which was interesting for them, and presentations were given about our schools. They seemed to love it. It was funny. They were taking a ton of pictures with me. And the last thing on our agenda is that I discussed with a lot of students about the recent award ceremony that we had here last Monday night, and it was definitely very well received, and all the students seemed to love it. So that was awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And also, once again, on behalf of the board, I want to congratulate the football team on an incredible season, incredible win this weekend. And I'm sure we'll be talking a little bit more about it in the next recognition ceremony that we have. You're welcome to stay, but as always, if you guys are busy with other things, you're excused.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Great. Dr. McCursey?
Next on the agenda is notice of resignations. We have the formal material from Angelo DeCoco, who's moved on to another high school in the region. He actually has been here a good while, and he left with very mixed emotions. Actually quite emotional about the reason for shifting. But it was something that for his own personal family reasons was the right move. We've immediately posted that position, and we'll look quickly to replace him. We did a bit of an exit interview with him, and it came back all very positive, but also with some important insights in terms of what we can continue to do to support students from the school psychologist standpoint. I don't know, Louis, if you want to add anything, or Mike want to add anything, because we have resignations, but this is a significant one.
Mike, you want to talk? Go ahead. Okay. No, absolutely. Angelo has been with us, he's got here before I did, and he has served at all four of our schools at some point. He wasn't formally at WIS until this year, but he has worked across the district and done a lot of good. I think you're correct. These very much were personal reasons, very legitimate ones for the particular school he's going to. I think it's a great school, and we're really happy for him. But it will be a loss. Replacing a school psychologist, especially one with the experience of Dr. DeCoco, is not going to be easy, but we will get someone, and hopefully they will eventually fill those shoes.
Mike, did you want to add anything, or?
I'll just say for the record that Angela has done a great job in getting to know him over the past couple of years. It's been really a pleasure. We wish him well. It is very much with mixed emotions that he is leaving, but we wish him the best. And as one would expect with Angelo, he offered to make any transition needs that the district has as he departs. He would help us any way he could. So that's very typical of how he has always conducted himself, and it's much appreciated.
And I just want to underscore, we're moving with this great speed to replace that position. It's posted. It's a critical area of supports for our students. Patty Faber is very concerned that we replace as fast as we can, but obviously we'll bring somebody in of high caliber. But it's a critical area of need that we're able to provide here in Weston. So that's that update for you.
Can we have a motion?
Move that the Weston Board of Education acknowledges the resignation of Angelo DeTocco effective January 1, 2020.
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Gina. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Motion approved. Now, the highlight of the evening, the calendar committee
Yeah, this
process.
This is scintillating. It's incredibly exciting, so I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Craw. I'm sorry, we'll give it to Mr. Rim.
Well, I'll try to get your engagement here in this process. Calendar committee, each year, very important committee that looks at the upcoming year's calendar that has already been approved by the board, the 2021 calendar, but also then builds the next calendar out. So we have a representative group that will get together, representing all bargaining units, administration. Board will have representation on that committee as well. And, we look at, the current calendar, what are the pros and cons, how can we improve upon the calendar. And so we have a lot of years of information behind us. But each of those groups, we also have the PTO as a part of that, goes back to their representative groups between the two meetings that we typically have to elicit additional feedback. And then we come to the board with recommendations for the March Board of Ed meeting. And then I believe it's ultimately voted on the April meeting.
Yes.
Bill?
Yeah.
Correct. So there you have it. I assure you, actually, if you are the board member on that committee, it's I think well functioning, efficient, and those two meetings, we work ourselves out of a job after two meetings.
Yeah.
I might add, one reason we've started putting this in the December as a heads up is so you as board members can be thinking about any calendar items or issues that you'd want to make sure your representative on that committee is bringing to the table. You might even have one now to share, if not, at least when the chair identifies who your representative will be. Typically, it's been Dan McNeil, but obviously he's not on the board anymore. Rumor has it he would fly in for this. If
Oh, he would
nominated.
definitely fly in to be part of this.
Yeah. But if you do have any, comments, thoughts in the past, at this point, some board members have brought up how we structure early release for teacher conferences, other things. But in general, the feedback we're getting is that people are satisfied with the overall design of the calendar, the way we handle the February break. That's sometimes been a point of discussion. We do the 180 days. Some districts will schedule 182, so you get a safety valve for days like maybe tomorrow, things like that. But these are all things to be thinking about. The other thing is that Weston very much wants to be fully done by the start of the last week of June. So that does shape pretty dramatically what we do. Some districts don't have a problem if they end up in school some in June. It seems Weston does not want that. So that affects us a great deal. But these could be any number of the issues you as a board should think through, even ahead of the couple opportunities you have to engage in this process.
Well, I think the first order of business is just having someone on the committee, someone representative from the board on the committee. So any volunteers? Hillary? Yes. Great. Okay.
Great. So we'll get that in the record, and Meredith will make sure Hillary gets all the notices.
I think we'll move now to school start and end time.
Okay. I'm going to ask if Lisa and Laura at least would move up to the table here so we can have a little more of a discussion. I'll set this up a little bit, but then I really was wanting Ken, Lisa and Laura, who are part of the task force, to provide some updates You had in your packet, and thus in the public record for the community, a compilation of the updates I've been doing for you on behalf of the task force. But while you've been receiving those through the super notes, they had not yet been put into the formal public record here for the board. The task force thought that was very important to do that. I agree completely. So this is that sort of first document for you. And what you have in there is a portion of the introduction that went out with the survey that's now underway. You then also have 3 time-specific updates to 3 of the task force meetings showing what we went through and where we are. There's an MO here, and the task force met coincidentally today. We talked about today's presentation. We also talked about a recommendation I'll make here in a second. Because when we bring the recommendation to you, we want that to be holistic and be able to have all pieces fit together. We're not giving you parts of it now in terms of what we're finding and thinking. We can give some suggestions, some ideas, but if we start digging into particular pieces till we have the whole figured out, it won't be productive. The recommendation I'm asking you to think about and actually endorse, at least could be consensus today, is that we as a task force, I on behalf of the task force would bring to you in February our recommendation, not January. There are a couple reasons for that. One is we want to allow enough time for inquiry. We've had 2 very good focus groups with parents. The survey is now out. We think that may spark more interest and feedback on the issue, which may lead to more focus groups for parents. We also are starting the focus groups for staff now. We want to, in addition, the students are now being surveyed starting today. They're going to, both at the middle school and the high school, they're being surveyed. We're not surveying the elementary students. They're going to make time during the day in both buildings this week to try and encourage students to complete the survey. I don't care what the answer is, as I told the principals. I just would like people to use the power of their voice to tell us what they think about this. We want that additional time as a task force to then bring to you in February the recommendation. That would give you that meeting to engage in the recommendation, the March meeting to engage in the recommendation, the April meeting. I also think you'll be wanting to use at least a couple of your committees to dig into this. And actually starting very soon, Ken's going to be bringing into the curriculum committee some of the scheduling topics and issues that we've been digging into. In general and in sum, this task force has been working very, very well. And when you get the recommendation, it'll be quite thorough. The parents have been excellent in reaching out. The town representative has been excellent in reaching out. Administrators have done the same. The WTA representatives have done the same out to both levels of buildings, and our ASME representative has also been active there. So once we're done with the discussions with Ken, Lisa, and Laura, I would like at least a consensus indication from the board that you support the idea of us bringing you the recommendation in February, because the task force would like that time to really bring you a robust, thoughtful recommendation. So I don't know, Ken, if you want to, and then.
So the task force has been very much process-oriented. We are essentially gathering data, talking about pros and cons of various options. We, with Laura and Lisa's help, we've been gathering information regarding schedules. With Phil's also part of the task force, gathering information regarding transportation, athletics. Mark Berkowitz is part of the process. So we are looking at this issue from all angles and pulling together all that information to make an informed recommendation, and the board will have that information available as part of the recommendation. And certainly, you know, our goal is to be able to you know, essentially try to, you know, anticipate many of the questions ahead of time and see if we can, for example, we were looking at recently in the last couple committee meetings, the length of the school day in the SWC schools as well as the DERG A schools. And so that's leading us back to curriculum committee for some discussion this Thursday at 9 a.m. regarding our school schedules, and we have a 6-hour and 45-minute day, and there is a range of length of school days. And is that another variable that we want to look at? And so Laura and Lisa have crafted schedules for each of the 5 options. Obviously, we have our current our current schedule is one of the options, but we're even tinkering with a 6-hour and 30-minute day. So we try to address some of the issues on the back end of the day where it's very difficult for co-curriculars at times to, in terms of logistically, get to where they need to go for events. So we're looking at all variables, all options, and it's really prompting the principals to think about their current schedules. Even if no change is made at all, it's prompting that kind of discussion. Could we address some structural issues through our schedules? So, Lisa and Laura can add from an instructional standpoint, and also from what they've experienced on the committee, if you just want to jump in.
So in terms of the schedules, I can speak to Patty Falber and I have been in communication to talk about what the different options might look like at each one of our schools. And there certainly are some options. They're very individual by grade level, because what a kindergarten day looks like is very different than what a 5th grade day looks like. So we've talked about possibilities to look at for where we might find time should we go to the shortened school day, the 6-hour, 30-minute school day rather than the 6:45. In terms of shifting the times, the options for just shifting the times or flipping with the schools is less of an impact to us, because it's just taking the schedule and moving that time around a little bit. But we have some focus groups coming up at our schools to talk to the teachers, both on the impact for the school day and also for their personal lives as well. So we'll be having that information coming forward. I've found the meetings are highly productive. There's been some really good conversations, and everybody's really trying to look at all the different angles, all the impacts, all the possibilities. I don't know if you want to speak about the busing a little bit. Has really been
We give Lisa a chance on the
schedules
secondary
before we go
schedule,
out. Okay.
and then we can talk about transportation and pull Phil in.
As Laura was saying, I mean, the difference between an elementary schedule just within the elementary grade ranges, and then you look at the impact on the middle school and the high school, there are a lot of sometimes unintended consequences that can come about from certain changes. What we looked at was we looked at the current schedule. We looked at schools in this area that have adopted different time changes, and looked at, for me, the most important thing is the instructional minutes and how the instructional minutes are delivered within the school day, because you can change the time and move the hours and things, but at the same time we have to look at we run, for example, the high school 8 periods, but we drop 2 each day, which everyone really likes, because it keeps things reduces the stress, it keeps things calmer. And so what are the consequences if we start playing around with the different times and the rotations? The big thing with the rotation is currently we have an afternoon rotation that you have to look at how many times would those classes be hit for sports, leaving early for our athletes to drive. And, so then do you rotate through the day, and which certainly is an option. But when you do that and you have shared staff, there are other complications. So it's a pretty complicated scenario, if you will, when you look at it. And then here at the middle school, when you have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, the different lunch shifts, the way they do their PFAs, everything else, their extended learning time, it's, I would say that we just have to be really clear about understanding the impact instructionally on, the changes that we could make, because some high schools, they changed, and then they changed their schedule, and they went to a block schedule or something like that, which is not, that is all other implications on the delivery of instruction, especially with AP exams and things. So I think I'm probably rambling too much, so I will stop. But those are kind of the factors that we have been looking at, and getting feedback about. I mean, pretty much any high school student is going to say, yeah, I'd like to sleep later. But there are other things. Yeah, you sleep later, but you're staying up later doing homework, or what are you doing in the morning if you're coming in because you have jazz? Like, there are just so many different factors that we have to, at least, I think, present so people have a really clear overview of what the implications are.
Is there one issue or two issues that you're probably spending more time than others because they're the kind of gating factors, or haven't really gotten to that yet?
We're really digging into all of the issues, and whether it's, and I wouldn't have anticipated this in terms of looking at the instruction as deeply. I didn't necessarily anticipate us going as deep, but since there are so many options, we've had to. So I think Lisa's given a good preview of what we're going to be talking about at Curriculum Committee. But in terms of things like transportation, we found that there are certainly parameters we have to stay in within. So, for example, the 45 minutes between the routes. We can't, given the layout of Weston, shrink our routes without incurring significant costs due to busing. So once we've learned things like that, we found out where we don't really have as much opportunity as where we might with others.
Which, by the way, one of the constraints is that we're trying to keep this cost neutral.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, I can, and we had, the task force is working wonderfully, and as many know, I've lived this, I was superintendent in Greenwich when this recommendation was made, and I've lived it for a couple of years. I'm a parent in the district, and we're lapping how Greenwich did this in ways, and you as a board are working wonderfully on this, unlike the board did there when I was superintendent, frankly, and I'm happy to put that in the public record. You all are really approaching this in a good way. They let themselves, a couple members, get too politicized on it, and it really affected things. And we're avoiding that here. So I think one thing we're avoiding, specific, is that. What I think the scheduling thing is, we are really digging into the scheduling thing, and that's really important, because a couple meetings ago, and you can check me on this, I played the role of, I'm playing multiple roles as facilitator of this, frankly, which is I kept saying, okay, well, you're saying it may not work, but then change the schedule. You're saying it's not going to work, change the schedule. So the three here, backed up by assistant principals, have dug into, can we change the schedule? And we're not necessarily showing you that work right now, but it's very elaborate, very thoughtful, and very detailed. So even if the recommendation is not to proceed, I'm not hinting at anything. Today, the task force said maybe that may be something we'd bring forward. Let me be very specific. The things you will see from what the task force said today is, for sure, a tight research summary on the medical issues. We may borrow the Norwalk report and footnote like crazy, because their report on recommending the change was very good on that. We want to make sure you have the faculty perspective, particularly at the high school, but also at the elementary schools. Very important, this will be the January work of the task force, is whether this is a recommended change or not, what are the other critical issues to think about for the well-being of students as it relates to this issue? Survey is underway right now. We're beginning to understand what that survey is telling us, but it's too early to share those results in any meaningful way because it's in the middle of it. We do know that people are going through the survey at a high rate. We want to kick the responses up, but those who start at 88% complete, which is a marker that is a good survey, well designed, but we want to bring you that survey research in context, because we may recommend something counter to what the survey research says. We'll see. We want to share the focus group findings. We want to share all the deliberations of the committee, some of the notes you've now seen. We want to share each element of the task force. So, for example, Mark Berkowitz's work on the athletics, I've shared that with other superintendents, and they've been very, very impressed with looking at all those aspects. The thing that emerged today was interesting is the recommendation may come to you with one or two lead options, and the recommendation that we then go out and do another survey while you're deliberating to look at some things. So the group is working very hard, very thoroughly, and we're hoping that we would have that grace to at least come to you in February with a recommendation as opposed to next month.
Bill, I just,
Any questions?
well,
Yeah.
just a clarifying question, maybe just to get it out into the public. When we're talking about, the concern about the impact on athletics, I just think that the public should be aware of the large percentage of our high school students who are participating in our athletics. It's a crazy high percentage. So I don't want people thinking, oh, you're only thinking about athletes, because athletes make up 75, 80% of your student body, Lisa, something like that?
Closer to 70.
70? So, I mean, it's a significant portion of our student body. I just didn't want people to
Yeah.
think we were focusing
Yeah.
on a small percentage of our
Yeah,
students.
and Norwalk, it's maybe 60%. New Canaan tonight, their board will be voting on whether to include this in their budget process. They've been working very actively on it. Again, their proportion of athletes would be comparable to ours. So it's a real issue, but it's not the only issue.
The other thing I would say is it's not just the athletes. As far as the students involved in our theater program, those students, especially when they're producing the plays and everything, are there even later than the athletes. Some of them don't leave that school until 11 o'clock at night. So that, although they won't be missing their classes in the afternoons, they're there very late. And we have about 100 students in that program as well.
Just a question about the February recommendation date, and I don't need an exact date, but we are talking about the beginning of February or the end of February?
It'd be the board meeting.
Board meeting.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking is just, I want to know, is this with the intention of, having from March on to implement said, if you were to go in that direction, for a September 2020 start date?
Yeah, and others can speak, and that was a discussion today. We focused today's task force on, if the board agrees that it's a February presentation, we want it to be at that board meeting, so it's very much the public meeting. But there'll be work of some of the committees ahead of that, the curriculum committee.
Yeah.
But yes, it'd be right now aiming towards fall 2020.
Right.
Some communities, the boards have made the commitment in that spring and said, we're voting to do this. But now let's do it for that following school year, say the 21st, to allow enough lead time. And that has come up in most places. That has actually been fairly common. That's not necessarily what we might do here. I think that we are keeping it budget neutral. That's another reason for the timing. We are unable to make shorter the bus cycles, the 2 tiers, and some of that is just the layout of our campuses. Right now, we're pretty confident that we can keep this budget neutral. New Canaan knows it can't. It's going to be looking another maybe $600,000 to $800,000 in its budget. Greenwich, it's a good 1.3 million they've added to their budget, for this. Norwalk's adding about 500,000 to its budget for this. I mean, one advantage we have of not having flexibility on our busing tiers is that we can. That's what's driving the cost in the other towns.
No, we've been working on this for several years now, as you state in your report, so it would seem that we wouldn't need to delay it yet another year, but I appreciate what you're saying as far as doing it right. This is a tiny question, but I did notice, and I heard from you earlier also, Bill, that the parent focus group for the upper schools, there was a bad weather, and so you only ended up having 6 people in that focus group, as opposed to the 15 you were hoping for. Any thought to try that again, or are you just going to do another round of them after the survey comes in anyway?
Yeah, good question, and it's a good question, not a small one. It was a lower school. It
Oh, it was
caught
the
up
lower
in a
school.
snow day,
Okay,
and
sorry.
what the administrators on the task force are doing is letting the parents fully run all of that work, so it can't be, and I'm just so it can't be seen that we were trying to modify it or direct it.
Right.
The 2 parent leaders on that are
So they may make a
excellent.
decision to do another one.
Yes, yeah, Jenny
Great.
Walsh and Kristen Anik are leading that. They've done a superb job from soup to nuts designing everything, and we're watching carefully. Does the survey stir up stuff? And in fact, one reason the task force to get the survey out and do it lean and mean, and I think it is a lean survey, was in the least it will stir. And so that's one reason we're looking for more time, because post the January break, we might have parents saying, well, I want to come to a focus group. So that, they have the design, they could do that.
I just had a question. When I went through, there was the dummy route from about first students, and then the New Canaan update. are we going to get access to that before February?
To which?
To the dummy bus routes and to the update from New Canaan?
Well, I can give you the update from New Canaan. The dummy bus routes, that was the idea, and we don't have that option on the table at this point. That was collapsing runs down. And that would cost us more money, and we just logistically can't handle, all of you come onto campus, trying to move cars and people on and off without that 45, 50-minute cushion would be a real issue. So we think there are 5 viable options here. You know, you can dice these down even smaller, but it starts to become counterproductive, I think. So we still can get those times from first student, but that's what we meant by that, was the condensing them down. But we set that aside in a task force meeting about a month ago. I mean, New Canaan, what they're doing, which is interesting, is that they're having their 3 elementaries start at 7:45. They're having the high school start at, well, this is what's in the plan. So but the high school's at 8:30. They're having, as you may know, they have the largest middle school in the state. So one part of the middle school will start at 9:15, and the other, I'm looking at my notes, will start at 8:35. What's important there is their 3 elementaries are neighborhood schools, so there will be no pickup earlier than 7:06, and most are at 7:20. So they've been very thoughtful at that issue. For us, if we were to go to the 7:45 start time, that would still be about a 6:50 pickup for the first run on buses. So that's something to consider.
Did you say if they started at 7:45, the first pickup would be at 6:50?
For us,
Wouldn't that mean someone's on a bus for
yes.
55 minutes?
Yeah, we have some runs that it's that long here.
Currently?
Yeah.
I thought no kid was supposed to be on a bus longer than 20 minutes.
No, that's not the policy.
45.
Yeah, so it's about
Thank you.
45. Yeah, so one thing New Canaan's done and other towns are doing, I mean, if there's 1 or 2 issues, transportation is really the biggest issue. And we'd like, and one of the parent focus groups asked, was there a way to make the busing more efficient? We really can't. These are as efficient as the runs can get. Buses aren't stopping for phantom students and things like that, so we're not losing time there.
You mentioned a 9:15 middle school start?
That's, yeah.
That's yeah,
New
New
Canaan.
That's out of the, is that out of the ordinary? That
Well,
seems like a pretty
Norwalk's
late-
also going to have some in that
Right.
realm. So, you know, who knows what New Canaan will do. They're also, they're not, we'll see what happens tonight. The board is not voting on school start end time. I put that in quotes. They're voting on asking the superintendent to put it in the budget process. And through the budget process, determine if they can afford it, and then that would be how they determine to go ahead.
Right.
You know, so, you know, we'll see. There are conversations in Westport. I don't know how far they'll move. There are conversations at the state levels. You've heard from me now on a couple updates. Not clear whether that'll actually amount to legislation, and if it does, it's not clear if it'd be a mandate or encouraged. So we'll see.
Well, any more questions?
I just want to say thank you, Bill, and the others who are on the committee, because this is not light work. I know this is really heavy work, and but really important work for the health of the kids, and I really appreciate the deep dive. I know it's not simple.
Yep.
Yeah.
Look forward to hearing the recommendation in February.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I'll say, and it's a lot of work, and that's why there was an important aha today, that there could be aspects of this that we try and take into our practice through discussions with the board either way. And again, I'm not hinting that we're going one way or the other, but I would hope you'd hear that we're trying to learn from this, not just for school start end time, but for other aspects of how we do our work here in Weston. So, all right, thanks.
Let's move to,
And
thank you.
And principals, you can head home unless you want to talk graduation.
Graduation date. Bill?
Yeah. the slight update on what you received, I assume you had a chance to read it, but I'll be quick as to what's here. You may know the state passed a new law giving districts the boards, you all the ones to pick the graduation date. Historically, could not do that any sooner than roughly April 1, and typically you would vote as a board February or so to authorize the superintendent once April 1 came to set a date, and that timing is probably logical because then you know what snow has done to your school schedule. The state passed a law giving flexibility for boards to set that firm graduation date at any point. Of our area districts, 10 who responded to my outreach, I now know it's 6 are staying with the old method, including Darien, who came in the other day and told me since I sent you the information. 4 in the area are, though, and have set an early date. You saw that listed most locally as Wilton, which I think is what prompted some interest here. The high school administration, Lisa, Julie, Matt, and Mark met with me a couple weeks ago, and we came upon a critical issue for us in Weston, which is, and thus we're not ready to make a recommendation tonight. I thought we'd be able to. But the key issue is we cannot run a wonderful graduation while school's still in session. Lisa, you might be able to speak to that a little bit. We feel very, very good about how graduations have been run here. Yeah, might as well. I think what we were able to mount in the gym last year worked very, very well. But there is no way we can run graduation while we're also running exams and all the rest. So I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Sure. You know, part of our concern is that we have certain days of exams, and yes, the day of graduation is makeup. However, you know, if we set it, and then, you know, you would hope that the exam schedule, if there were delays or cancellations, moved along appropriately, but there could be a day where we have 2 exams. You have to worry about the students taking the exams, you know, students that need the extra time, different things like that. You have to worry about getting them dismissed, the buses, all of that. It's just a lot that goes on, and we are very particular about our graduation, probably obsessively so. We are in there, we are making sure everything is perfect, and our concern would be that we would, that would take away from that time to do that and to make it as lovely as, frankly, the community expects. I mean, from the time that we start that morning at 7:30 until we have graduation that day, we are basically in that gym making sure everything is perfect. And it just stretches us really thin if on top of that we're having to, you know, the exams and everything else and making sure that that all goes smoothly. Yeah, it's a concern of ours.
So what we think we may come back in January, and I have to talk a little more with the high school about it, but we definitely wanted your input tonight, was we might come back in January and say we would set a date specific, but then say every time we lose a day due to inclement weather, the graduation moves 1 day, and which gives some certainty, but it's not as precise as 4 of our area districts have done, but we are then trying to take advantage of the flexibility that 6 of the area districts have not. So again, to be very clear, and this was really Lisa's idea and I endorse it, but want you to talk about, we'd come back in January, is today, if tomorrow's a perfect day, our graduation would be June 11th, or is it the 13th? June 11th, and then if tomorrow's a snow day, then we'd know the graduation's June 12th. We'd have to factor in the weekend days that appear. But that makes it not set, but at least people can tell what we're doing.
Exactly.
I don't know if you want to add to that, Lisa.
Well, the other point is, you know, someone said, oh, well, you know, I think it's Wilton, right? Wilton already said it. Is it Wilton that it's having it on a Sunday, I believe? I'm sorry? Yeah, they have it on the weekend. Now, I've been here 34 years. I remember having it on the weekends. And we could do that. But again, there is something very special, I think, of having the entire faculty there walking in with the gowns. And realistically, are they all going to come back on a Saturday or a Sunday? Some, I'm sure, will. But I would just, I would not want to see it on the weekend. Maybe that's just my own opinion. I would like to see it, as we always have it, starting sharply at 6 o'clock on whatever weekday it falls. And if the community knows, it just keeps, moving up to a certain date, and then we can set it, that I think that that would work best.
Well, what's the latest going in, starting in January, kind of moving from January on? What's the latest that still gives us some flexibility, kind of makes it a little bit more comfortable for us to set a date, like?
Meaning,
So, January, where does it become, I guess, how long can we wait for this to still be something that, how much earlier are you feeling comfortable that you could set a date, I guess, than how we currently do it?
I like setting it on April 1st, because we have had things happen in March with weather and things like that. And, just getting the news, getting the date set as soon as we can, because I understand people are flying in, they have to make arrangements for family, I think is important. But I wouldn't want to do it at the expense of not making it as, I think our graduation is, no one can compare to our graduation.
Yeah.
And I've heard people tell us that.
So
it's
what are the views
beautiful.
for setting it earlier than April 1st? Anybody have
I know some families, because of travel, they want as much notice as possible to make plans, but, we also have to deal with the realistic logistical issues of putting on a graduation, and if our staff, needs time without having a full cadre of students in for almost 3/4 of a day in order to put on a graduation, I would think our parents could understand that and could be willing to wait. April 1st, you're still, 2.5 months out
Still,
from
yeah.
when the graduation is happening. I would just say we need to make sure it's on an agenda. There was one year we forgot to endow the superintendent with the power to set the date, and so we were a little
and
late.
so we didn't have graduation.
We were a little late getting it out, but I think people have to realize there's reasons behind the way things happen.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little bit puzzled on how
How this came
this
to your
became a
question.
two-page memo.
Well,
like-
because,
Yeah.
well, I actually, and I guess, one, because it's an issue that has caught it's a new law.
Right.
2, Wilton moved on it, and just so we know, Bridgeport, New Canaan, Stratford, and Wilton so far have set early dates. Darien will not, Fairfield will not, Monroe will not, Norwalk will not, Region 9
Right.
will not, and Westport will not. And there are others still figuring out. I think because of the change in the state law, because this is a very visible topic and issue, we had been asked, and so just wanted to look at it. There's a legal question that the memo speaks to that's not answered. That's almost immaterial right now. It's more for us the logistics.
Yeah.
What I could recommend is that we could come back in January just to say, we can think about it a little more, you can think about it, but the recommendation would be, authorize the superintendent to set the date effective April 1, so then then it's locked in, we know what we're going to do, we can tell people at that point you might decide, no, we'd rather have you set it now and keep moving it every day. It gives you a little time to think about it. But, as we typically with the board, bring you a topic, bring you an issue, then come back the next month
Yeah.
to have you vote on it.
Based on what I'm hearing, unless someone, I think we probably do what we've always done, and if there's something else, between now and January, February, March, if you want to do something different, come back to the board. But other than that, just status quo, right? Unless I'm missing something. All right.
Right, so then Lisa and you and I talk a little more, but then we would have on the agenda for the January meeting, just so it's done and out of the way, is that you would be authorizing the superintendent effective April 1 to make that decision on the
Right.
graduation date.
Yeah,
So we avoid missing that.
yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
so Meredith, we can make sure we update the January agenda. All right?
Great.
So
Thanks,
Lisa, have
Lisa.
thank you.
We're at the financial update. Phil?
This is the fifth financial update for the fiscal year FY20. For the year-to-date ended November 30th, we've expended 31% of our budget, or $16,455,888. We have encumbrances of 64%, or $33,915,276. And we have additional anticipated spend of 5.5%, or $2,943,256. We're projected to end the year with a deficit, which has remained unchanged from last month, of 506,101. As we mentioned last month, we do have an ongoing process of reviewing any possible savings to mitigate this over expenditure.
And if I might just emphasize one point, that the overage we currently have is substantially driven by individual student needs within the special ed realm, and as those students join us, those needs are identified. So some of that was necessary personnel, some of that was necessary transportation, and we are looking regularly at how to address that. In past years, we've had as much as a $1.3, $1.4 million overage related to these types of needs. That's critical we address those needs for students. We're in a very different place now with this number. But again, it's substantially focused on, as these students have joined us, those needs are then identified and become clear to us when, and these are not ongoing students, but new students. So these are things we're managing. I don't know, Phil, if you want to add any more to that, or?
No, yeah, I said it last time, and I think we should just make sure. I know that typically we deal with some of these overages come spring. I just want to make sure that we're pretty diligent now in terms of identifying those areas of savings where we basically can get back.
We will. We'll start doing
Back
that
home.
process in the third quarter.
Okay.
For the period ended, we had transfers totaling $28,807.49. We had two of those transfers in excess of $5,000, which will need board approval. The first was for $6,546, which was to cover a previous transfer for a lunch power at Hess. Second, $7,442.49 to cover the cost of a substitute library para at the high school. Moving on, sorry.
Internal services?
Internal Service Fund. The year-to-date expenditure of $188,529, which should leave a current balance of $1,348,828. And that is the end of the financial reports.
Any questions? We have a motion?
Move that the Weston Board of Education approve the sixth fiscal year 20 financial update as presented by Mr. Cross.
Second? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion passed. Okay, where do we go from here? Policy. Yep, we got a bunch.
Yeah, they're not, it's not quite as long as it looks. A couple of them, we listed them separately because of the titles, but they really are related. So the first item is your sex discrimination and sexual harassment policy for personnel. That has been changed. The recommendations, by the way, all the changes you see here were all recommended by your Shipman and Goodwin, which is your outside counsel, through their policy service. They were incorporated and brought to the policy committee, obviously, but nothing here is from scratch. There is something in here coming up like that, so that's why I'm kind of differentiating it. So the primary change here is to reflect a new regulation which will incorporate the complaint policy itself as a separate document from the policy. It used to be that the policy had the complaint form attached and so forth, but it was expanded to reflect a whole new regulation, which is why, if you look at the regulation, there's no blue and red on there or underlining, because it's all new. It actually specifically lists all of the Title IX coordinators. Sexual harassment falls under Title IX as well as Title VII. But specifically, any gender issue would fall under Title IX for personnel or for students. And it lists the coordinators. I am the district-wide Title IX coordinator in my role as HR director, but each school has one or two. Hurlbut has the assistant principal, the WIS has the assistant principal, and then what we did is we, last year, added one person from each, a male and a female assistant principal or other administrator to act as that person, because not everyone's comfortable going to a person of the opposite gender or even the same gender. It gives people a choice, essentially, of who they want to go to. And then, of course, everyone has the option just to come directly to me with complaints of this type. So the changes here are technical in nature. There is one typo that we caught in the policy committee that, it's not really a typo, but it was language that we put in ourselves a while back. If you look at page 2 of 6, it says such conduct constitutes sexual harassment regardless of the sex of the victim or the harasser. We had discussed putting that back in, and it was just my typographical error not doing so. That's a technical change that you can carry forward to a second reading, so my recommendation would be to do that. Answer any questions. And this is on not for vote tonight. As you know, you have information, and then we have a second reading at the next meeting. So keep going, or whatever you like. Go? Keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, sure. So the next policy and regulation that you have before you is the confidentiality, and access to student records, and the related regulation, which is classification of educational records. These are all technical updates, legal updates recommended by your outside counsel. Some of the interesting ones that have been added here with regard to the regulation are things along the lines of when we can expunge an expulsion record, for instance. It updates it to reflect current law, which we must expunge a expulsion upon graduation from high school unless it involves a student between the grades of 9 and 12 possessing a deadly weapon, in which case we can no longer expunge, and haven't been able to for a few years, but cannot expunge such a record. It used to be that we couldn't expunge it for anybody, but the law was changed to reflect younger students who may, for some reason, possess a deadly weapon. But again, we may not if it's between grades 9 and 12. Deadly weapon, just so you know, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but it's a wide range of things, so don't just think gun or knife. It can be a lot of different things. Fortunately, not something we frequently face in this district, but it is a major legal change that you should be aware of. The other items here are mostly technical in nature, and really, just bringing you into update with current law. It's been a few years since we updated it, so we just incorporated all the changes. Okay?
Okay.
Keep going. The next one that we have, this one is parent-teacher communications. Now, this one was recommended by your council. It's an entirely new, your outside council, it's an entirely new policy. And really it's intended to encourage communications between parents and teachers. Now, I have a technical suggestion, which I didn't bring up in policy, that I'd like to do here, is normally when we refer to parents in our policies, we usually say parent-guardian. So I would suggest that making that technical change, both in the name of the policy and in the language, that we just put that in there for the second reading. But otherwise, what this policy is intended to do is to demonstrate to the community and to our staff that we want to encourage various ways of communicating, by, back to school nights, for instance, through websites, through social media, so forth. Teachers directly communicating by phone and by email with parents and guardians. And we just didn't have a policy on this, so we wanted to put something in place. It's intended as a positive measure. The only thing in it that we really added to the recommendation from Shipman and Goodwin was that the board, referencing the civility policy that the board has and recently updated, that any interactions between our staff and parents be in compliance with that policy, both for the staff and for the parents, to protect the staff, and also so that parents are treated properly as well. So that was added.
Louis?
Yes.
Just a quick question. In the last part of the second paragraph, it says such policies and procedures shall require the district to conduct 2 flexible parent-teacher conferences for each school year.
Mm-hmm.
We only do that K to 5 as far as set conferences.
Yeah.
Do we need to
Yes,
state that?
thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, I mean, it really should just reflect what our, if that's not something that's going to happen, then we should reflect to say K-5. So that would be a technical change as well.
Mhm.
Thank you for pointing that out, Gene.
Follow up on that. Should we, not to overly complicate it, should we have language about availability of conferences in the middle school as needed? I mean, I just don't want it to make it seem like you can only have a conference K to 5. And I know that we sometimes go down the rabbit hole when we start trying to address every nuance in a policy,
Yeah.
but
Well, we generally encourage meetings. There was some language in here which we removed that was about home visits. We don't do home visits, and that's not something that I would encourage. There's all kinds of problems associated with that, but I think we do encourage our staff to meet with parents and guardians and so forth when there are concerns. In-person meetings are always preferable to email because email, it's hard to read tone, it's hard to read intention, it can lead to email. We encourage staff, if is an issue regarding a student, to reach out by phone or to bring the person in for a meeting, and sometimes would even include an administrator if it reaches that level. So I can take a look at it, but I do think that that's built into our culture in general. Keep going.
Okay, last one.
Okay. The last policy that we have on here, and this is our language, administration's recommendation, policy committee reviewed it, and this is your contract policy. So who signs your contracts? We wanted to bring it in line with your actual practice as opposed to, what it said here, which was the contracts are signed by the superintendent or their designee with review by legal advisors. That, of course, is true for the bulk of your contracts, but there are certain contracts that have to go to the board in which we bring to the board. So your big contracts, your Chartwells, your bus company, your cleaning service, things like that, the solar agreement, the solar power purchase agreement, all of those contracts have language in them which requires board approval. And generally the kind of clause you'll see is that we're representing that the bodies have issued all appropriate approvals. The superintendent can't act in that sense, so if you're the body. On the other hand, the bulk of your contracts can be signed by the superintendent, and our process for years has been, or the director of finance and operations, depending on the contract. So we sign a lot of contracts. I don't think you want us to bring every contract to you, but the big ones and the ones that require either a board approval in the body of the language of the contract or the chair to sign. Mm-hmm. So they'll say, we want the chair to sign. We'll bring it to you. The chair's not going to sign. The bylaws allow for the chair to sign on behalf of the board. The motion we normally bring to you is that the board approves and authorizes the chair to sign. Right. But that's only a handful of your contracts. So the intention of this policy is merely to reflect current practice. We did discuss in policy committee the issue of financial thresholds, of should we have a number of how much the value is or not, and we decided, or the committee decided at this stage to go forward codifying current practice and to monitor it. And if there are contracts that the board would prefer to review, which may be discussed in facilities or finance committee or so forth, we can always amend this. The other change you'll see here is the addition of numerous areas of protected classes. We don't allow our contractors to discriminate. We build into our contracts language to that effect, especially the ones that are working directly with kids or around kids or who employ people who work on our campus. But in general, we have anti-discrimination language, but we've built more and more complex language into there. A lot of these areas are specific to Connecticut, things like transgender status, gender identity, and so forth. And we added them in at the recommendation of your outside counsel, along with references to all of these various laws. So it's really intended to bring you into compliance and also to reflect your current practice.
Any questions?
That's all she wrote.
Okay.
Good.
Bill, Super's report?
Sure, I'll be brief. Let me first underscore a couple things that our student government board, student board members mentioned. This past week, we had the Kindness Assembly at the high school. I was fortunate enough to attend, and Mike was there as well. You might want to add a comment to this. It was an incredibly powerful gathering in a variety of ways. Obviously, the father of one of the victims spoke, and the daughter, who's a senior at Newtown. I will be writing to the superintendent to just, say what an incredible young woman she is. And she had just been down in Washington, and she said she's doesn't want to be an activist, but is an activist now in memory of her brother Daniel, and handled herself so incredibly well, as did her father. The music was a band playing some mix of soul, and there was a little sound problem, but nothing major. Poetry read by students, created for that day. And at the end, as I'd mentioned to a couple of you, Walter Durand took a step that in most high schools you wouldn't even think about, much less try. But at the end of the program, for a moment of peace, if you will, or a togetherness moment, he had all 800 students plus all the faculty come down out of the bleachers into the gym floor. And anyone who knows high schools and adolescents who've been sitting for a while, the last thing you do is put them in a floor unguided, other than through Walter Durand's voice over the microphone. And he wanted dead silence. He didn't get there, but he got to a low murmur. And everyone behaved themselves incredibly well. And this may sound like a small thing, but for those of us who spent years upon years around high schools, I mean, that was a very powerful moment that our students fully understood it and got it. The other thing I'll underscore, and then Mike, maybe you can come back to the kindness piece because it was important you were there, is the delegation from China. And I apologize to the board, we didn't find a way to connect you in, but this is from Guangdong province. It's about 30 educators. It's an incredible honor they're picking Weston. After us, they were headed up to Loomis Chaffee, which is an independent school of high regard. They were at a public school in New Jersey, and they were headed to Sacred Heart University to study teacher ed. But they were here to understand how we support teachers in their developmental process. Interesting enough, I was with them when we went into a drill lockdown. So that prompted, through translation, discussion with some 30 Chinese educators about what it means to be an administrator in American public education now when you spend time having to worry about the highly unlikely event, but that we all have to be ready for. And so it's just a fascinating moment about a very challenging topic. But Mike, I don't know if you want to share anything on this kindness piece, because it was quite a substantial moment for us.
I would just say it was a wonderful assembly and gathering, both remembering the tragedy at Sandy Hook and also celebrating all the good work that goes on at the high school and in the district. It was, I think, the takeaway that I had was really from, it was really about just being kind to everybody and not knowing that this may be the last time you talk to that person for one reason or another, and how would you want that to be remembered? How would you want that exchange to go? How would you want that to be if that was really what it was? And I think that struck a chord. I mean, as the two were talking, it struck a chord with the entire auditorium. It was very powerful. The music was wonderful, the poetry was wonderful, and Mr. Durant's mindfulness exercise at the end really encouraged kids to step out of their comfort zone and have a conversation and literally bump into somebody that you may not have known before. So it was really a great celebration and very indicative, I think, of the work that we do here in Weston, and certainly the community that they build at the high school.
In the quick sort of on that is the Sandy Hook Promise, you may know, an organization founded out of that tragedy. The parent is one of the founders of those. And he complimented Weston for, in a sense, growing its own here, is having an approach to insisting on kindness, being persistent with kindness. So instead of importing, it's a wonderful program, Sandy Hook Promise, rooted in tragedy, but trying to bring life out of that. But he said, you've grown your own here in Weston, and he was here 5 years ago and was back, and through his brother-in-law, is close to us. Matt Rizzo is his brother-in-law. So it was that was very important. Now to something different. In January, we start the budget process. We will have out to the community the dates on the budget process. We start on the 6th with all of you is the budget presentation, and there's a series of things, but I want to make sure that in very brief, clear terms, parents have that. I'm debating whether to send that this week, even though it's a busy week, but at least it's there before, right when people get back, and then resend it in that first week of January, because you as a board have put in a couple additional workshops, which is all public, a public forum. You've added some things, so I want the community to have that. So I'm thinking we will blast that out tight, lean, even though people are distracted, they have it, and then they'll get it again right when they get back. That basically the 2nd or 3rd of January.
Yeah, I think that's important to do, given that we've added a few dates that I think will. I think it's important for the community to know that there's a couple of dates there that we want to have that opportunity to engage on the budget. And so if we could get the calendar out a few times so that people are aware of all the dates, because there's a lot of them, and so I think if we do it a few times, at least, hopefully we'll be comfortable that the word got out there.
And just to be clear, it's not that long 3-pager, but it's just
I would
that's
just
the one
make it
section.
very
It's the 5 or
crisp.
6
Yeah.
January dates.
Right.
Don't worry,
That's
it's
right.
not the 3-pager.
Yeah.
And then just board members, if in your technology you're not seeing the budget dates, we can fix that for you. They're in the Google Calendar. You just have to load in if you haven't that particular link. We can help you with that. Craig, don't laugh. I even helped some people today with that. So those dates are there. They're in Google Calendar, and we can help you pull those up to make them visible. So that's my superintendent's report. I would urge you to read the principal's reports, because those are every other month, and this is the month.
Anything from our committees?
We would like to just say a couple things from the Communications Committee, if we may. Ruby, our colleague, Ruby Hedge, is not here tonight, but she did a lot of heavy lifting on this. We have spent some time working on a Weston Public School yearly marketing material plan, which really is, the shortest version is, how do we talk about our schools out in the world? How do we recruit interested families to Weston? And how do we talk about the schools as a real lever for bringing them here? And not so much the language we use, although we feel that some of the documents that we already have in hand, the brochure, the statistics on accomplishments, the graduating year statistics each year that we publish, are really excellent documents. And we took them in hand. Bill asked us if we would take a hard look at them, see if there was some editing we needed to do, but more importantly, I think it was the committee's interest in making sure that those get out there, because some of us hadn't seen some of these documents before, and we think that they're really valuable. So we're going to make sure that they are disseminated widely and shared widely, and also that there is the in-house capacity to maintain them and make sure that they're distributed properly. Is that about right? Okay.
Anything else from any of the other committees?
Yeah, from the policy committee, in addition to all the policies Louis so excellently went through today, we had a rather useful and interesting discussion with some of the school nurses and the assistant principal from the high school on vaping, and we're starting to look at what the district can do with respect to cessation, education, discipline related to, some of what we've all been hearing about in the news related to the, increase in vaping among an increasingly younger and younger student body population. So it was really impressive to see the information that our staff brought to the committee, and we had a really robust discussion. So we're looking at that policy and more to come.
I think from facilities, one of the things that I think we need to work on, and we started down the road in terms of being more explicit about how the district and the building committee work together on our capital projects in terms of really drawing the line on exactly who is responsible for what once we pick projects. I think that right now it's a little bit more ad hoc than I would like, and hopefully we can nail down a very specific process that will steer us in terms of how we manage these projects going forward, and a little bit more tightly than we have before. I think that's it for committees.
One more thing, curriculum we would have reported on, but we had a snow day, so the curriculum meeting will be on Thursday.
In terms of committee reassignments, we're waiting for the seventh board member to be appointed. That should be in the next week or so. There's a number of candidates that have raised their hands, and I think the Board of Selectmen is finishing up their interview process. The one thing, once the new board member is assigned and we reassign the committees, one of the things that I'd like to do is probably work with each of the committee chairs to come up with some goals for each of the committees so that are consistent with the overall goals of the district for the year. So we basically, each committee will have some strategic deliverables that they're working on in addition to the ticking and tying that we do, every month. Guess that's it for committees. Anything else?
Yeah, just typically at this point in the meeting, we have that, we have a chart that lists what's likely in the next meeting, and I have updated. So in January, in addition to any retirements, resignations, I hope there will be none, but we'll do a school start end time task force update. We'll do a discussion and vote on the graduation days we've discussed. There'll be the policy updates and some second readings, but that's the main business. Obviously, January is substantially a month for budgets, and predating that January 27th meeting, you will have a budget session.
Yep.
It's already in your schedule.
Great. Well, I'd like to wish my fellow board members, administration, and staff a wonderful holiday. And we all look forward to getting back together in January and rolling up our sleeves and digging into the budget.
Great.
With that, meeting adjourned.
You're going to start getting other boards in the region very jealous with that end time. So you have a start and end time model here. Thanks, Ken.